She cheated, but that wasn't the worst part. It was how she justified it. They say trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and forever to repair. But nothing prepares you for the moment you realize the person you love has been calculating your heartbreak like a business transaction. Hey everyone, before we get into the video, don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button if you want more stories just like this. Thanks for the support. James 34, the worst lies are often the ones we tell ourselves, but the second worst are the ones told by people who are supposed to love us. For the better part of a decade, I believed I was living a charmed life, the kind of existence that features in glossy brochures for suburban developments or the opening credits of romantic comedies. I was 34 years old, a successful project manager for a tech firm in the city, and married to a woman who seemed, for all intents and purposes, to be the perfect partner. Our home was pristine, our social calendars were overflowing with the right kind of engagements, and we never seemed to argue about anything deeper than what color to paint the guest room. It was a life curated for social media, a highlight reel of a marriage that looked solid from the outside, but was apparently hollowing out from the inside. Looking back, the signs were there, buried under layers of comfort and routine. There was the distance that grew not in miles, but in inches, the way she would turn away from me in bed the moment I got under the covers, or the way her laughter seemed to ring a note higher when she was on the phone with her friends than it ever did when I told a joke. But I was complacent. I mistook her lack of complaint for contentment. I thought that because we were paying the mortgage on time and planning our next vacation, the foundation was secure. I didn't realize that in a marriage, silence isn't always golden. Sometimes, it's just the sound of someone loading the gun they're going to shoot you with later. The crack in the facade appeared on a mundane Tuesday evening. I had come home early to beat the traffic, hoping to surprise my wife with a takeout dinner from that expensive Italian place she loved. I let myself in the front door, expecting the house to be quiet. Instead, I heard the murmur of voices from the study. I paused in the hallway, my hand tightening around the handle of the paper bag, smelling of garlic and basil. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't suspicious. I just assumed she was on a Zoom call or catching up with a girlfriend. I walked toward the study, intending to drop my keys on the desk and head to the kitchen to set the table. But as I got closer, the tone of her voice stopped me cold. It wasn't the professional cadence she used for work, nor the casual gossip tone she reserved for her friends. It was intimate. It was low, throaty, and laced with a kind of affection I hadn't heard directed at me in years. I stood frozen in the doorway, the paper bag rustling softly in the silence of the hallway. Through the slight gap in the door, I could see her sitting in my leather armchair, her legs tucked up underneath her, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. She wasn't looking at a computer screen. She was looking down at her phone, a small, secret smile playing on her lips. I couldn't hear the other person's voice, only her side of the conversation, but that was enough. She whispered that she missed him, that she couldn't stop thinking about the weekend, that she wished she didn't have to pretend anymore. Every word was a physical blow to my stomach. My heart didn't just break. It seemed to stop beating entirely, suspended in a vacuum of disbelief. I waited, paralyzed, hoping for some context that would explain it away, a prank, a role play, a surprise for me. But then she laughed that specific breathless laugh and said, I know. He's so oblivious. It's almost too easy. That was the moment the ground fell out from under me. The he she was referring to was me. I wasn't the husband she cherished. I was the obstacle she had to navigate, the punchline to a joke I wasn't even aware I was part of. I backed away slowly, silently, my retreat fueled by a primal instinct to hide. I went out to the garage, sat in the darkness of my car, and stared at the steering wheel until my eyes burned. I didn't go back inside that night. I drove around for hours, the city lights blurring into streaks of meaningless color, my mind racing to reconstruct the last year of my life. The business trips she took alone, the girls' nights out that lasted until dawn, the new lingerie she bought that I never saw her wear. It all fit together now, forming a picture of a reality I'd been too blind to see. I realized then that the discovery was only the beginning. The true horror was yet to come. The hours I spent driving in the dark felt like a purgatory between the life I thought I had and the ugly reality that was waiting for me at home. By the time the sun began to crest over the horizon, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and gray, I had cycled through every emotion imaginable. Shock gave way to blinding anger, which then melted into a pitiable, hollow sadness. I wasn't ready to go back inside the house and face her. I wasn't ready to see the face of the woman who had been systematically dismantling our life while I slept peacefully beside her. But I knew I couldn't run forever. I needed to know the depth of the betrayal. I needed to know who he was, how long it had been going on, and if there was anything left of our marriage to salvage. I parked the car a few blocks away and walked back to the house, the morning chill biting through my jacket. I entered through the front door as if nothing had happened, trying to mimic the movements of the man I was yesterday, the man who didn't know his wife was whispering sweet nothings to another man in his own home. She was in the kitchen, making coffee, looking fresh and radiant, the very picture of domestic bliss. She smiled when she saw me, a bright, practiced expression that now looked grotesque to my eyes. She asked where I had been all night, her voice laced with a concern that I realized was entirely performative. She was worried I'd found out, not worried about me. I lied. I told her I had a work emergency, a server crash that required my immediate attention. It was a testament to how easily she could deceive me that she accepted the lie without a second thought. She didn't question why I didn't call or why I smelled like stale fast food air and exhaustion. She just nodded sympathetically, poured me a cup of coffee, and turned back to the counter to butter toast. Watching her stand there, going through the motions of being a supportive wife, made me feel physically ill. It was the dissonance that was unbearable, the gap between her actions and her reality. I wondered if she felt any guilt at all, or if she had simply compartmentalized her life so thoroughly that sleeping with another man was no more significant to her than picking up a dry cleaning. Over the next few days, I became a detective in my own marriage. I didn't confront her immediately. I needed to be armed with facts before I detonated the bomb. I started paying attention to everything: her phone usage, her receipts, her schedule. I found a credit card statement tucked inside a book in her bag, a bill for a boutique hotel downtown on a night she had told me she was staying with her sister. I found a receipt for a gold watch, an expensive brand that I certainly didn't own and that she had never mentioned buying for a relative. The pieces of the puzzle were snapping into place with a terrifying clarity. It wasn't a fling, it was a relationship. It had structure, it had financial investment, and it had a history. The hardest part was maintaining the facade of normalcy. Every night, I would lie in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing, wondering if she was thinking about him. I felt like a stranger in my own bedroom, an intruder in a life that no longer belonged to me. I watched her move through the house, touching things I had bought, cooking meals I paid for, living a lifestyle I provided, all while sharing her true self with someone else. The resentment began to fester, eating away at my affection until all that was left was a cold, analytical desire for the truth. I wanted to look her in the eye and see if she could lie to my face. I wanted to see the moment her mask slipped. I decided the confrontation had to happen on a weekend, when we had nowhere to be and no distractions to hide behind. I spent a week gathering the evidence, the hotel receipts, the copied phone logs, the photos I managed to take of her entering a restaurant with him. I kept them in a folder hidden in my office at work, bringing it home only on the day I had chosen. By the time Saturday arrived, I was a walking wire, vibrating with tension. I woke up early, watched her sleep for a long time, trying to find the woman I fell in love with in the relaxed lines of her face. But I couldn't find her. All I saw was the stranger who had betrayed me. When she finally stirred and opened her eyes, smiling that sleepy, trusting smile, I knew it was time. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply stood up and told her we needed to talk. The way her expression froze, the microsecond of panic before she could compose her features, told me she knew exactly what was coming. I led her to the living room and placed the folder on the coffee table between us. It was a thick, intimidating stack of paper, the physical manifestation of her infidelity. I didn't say a word as I watched her eyes scan the documents. I saw the color drain from her face, the way her hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the receipts and the logs. For a moment, I felt a grim satisfaction. I had caught her. I had pulled back the curtain and revealed the wizard. But that satisfaction was short-lived, quickly replaced by a heavy, suffocating sadness. We were here in this moment because of choices she had made. We were dismantling a life because she had decided her desires were more important than my dignity. When she finally looked up at me, her eyes were dry. I expected tears. I expected begging, pleading, or at least a display of remorse. I expected her to fall apart, to tell me it was a mistake, that she was lonely, that she didn't mean to hurt me. I was prepared for the standard script of infidelity, the apology tour, the promises of therapy, the desperate attempt to put the pieces back together. I was steeling myself against the emotional torrent of a guilty conscience. But she didn't cry. She took a deep breath, sat up straighter, and looked at me with a calmness that was infinitely more disturbing than any weeping could have been. She didn't deny it. She didn't try to gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. She simply nodded, folded her hands in her lap, and admitted that yes, she was having an affair. She told me his name was Julian, a man she had met at a conference 8 months ago. She described him with a dispassionate clarity that felt like a knife twisting in my gut. He was a venture capitalist, older, wealthy, and, according to her, exciting. She recounted the timeline of their relationship with the efficiency of a project manager reporting on a quarterly review. They met for coffee, then drinks, then dinners, and eventually weekends away. She spoke about the hotel stays and the secret trips, not with shame, but with a matter-of-fact tone that suggested she was discussing a hobby she had taken up, like knitting or tennis. It was as if she had detached herself from the moral weight of her actions, observing them from a distance where they couldn't hurt her. I sat there, stunned into silence by the lack of emotion. I asked her why. I asked her how she could do this to us, to the life we had built. I waited for the explanation that would make sense of the chaos, the reason that would bridge the gap between the woman I married and the stranger sitting in front of me. I was expecting a confession of unhappiness, maybe a complaint that I worked too much or didn't pay her enough attention. Those would have been painful, but they would have been human. They would have been flaws in our relationship that we could have analyzed, perhaps even fixed. I was ready to take responsibility for my part in the failure of our marriage. I was ready to hear that I had been neglectful or boring. But that isn't what she said. Instead, she leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, and looked me dead in the eye. She told me that she wasn't unhappy. She said that she actually loved our life. She loved the house, the security, and the comfort I provided. She told me that she was proud of what we had accomplished together. Then, she dropped the bomb that would shatter my world more completely than the affair itself. She told me that the affair wasn't about what I lacked. It was about what she felt entitled to. She explained that she could have her cake and eat it too. She saw no reason why she shouldn't enjoy the stability and companionship of our marriage while also pursuing the thrill and passion of a new romance. To her, these things were not mutually exclusive. They were just different compartments of her life, and she couldn't understand why I couldn't see the logic in that. As she spoke, the room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in on me as I struggled to process the absolute narcissism of her words. She wasn't apologizing. She was enlightening me. She was explaining, in a calm and reasoned voice, that I was being old-fashioned and restrictive. She used phrases like maximizing her potential and diversify her emotional portfolio. It was a chilling, business-like deconstruction of our sacred vows. She argued that human beings were not meant to be monogamous for 40 years, that expecting one person to fulfill every need was unrealistic and unfair. By stepping outside the marriage, she claimed she was actually protecting our relationship. She said that by getting her excitement elsewhere, she was able to come back to me refreshed and patient, that she was less likely to nag me or resent our domestic life because her other needs were being met by Julian. I listened, paralyzed by the sheer audacity of her logic. She was turning her betrayal into a virtue. She was painting herself as a pragmatist, a pioneer of modern relationships, while I was the villain for clinging to outdated ideals of fidelity. She looked at me with pity, as if I was the one who didn't understand how the world worked. She asked me if I was happy, and when I didn't answer, she took my silence as a confirmation. She pointed out that we rarely fought, that our household ran smoothly, that I was generally content. She argued that her discretion was a gift to me. She wasn't flaunting the affair, she was managing it. She wasn't leaving me for Julian. She was ensuring she could stay with me by satisfying the parts of herself that I allegedly couldn't reach. It was a masterclass in manipulation, but what was truly terrifying was that she seemed to believe it. She wasn't trying to con me. She was trying to convert me. She wanted me to see the brilliance of her arrangement. She suggested that maybe I should find someone too, that we could open up the marriage and both live happier, more fulfilled lives while maintaining our partnership. She spoke of ethical non-monogamy as if she hadn't just spent 8 months lying to my face. She stripped the word ethical of all meaning, applying it retroactively to her deception. She couldn't understand why I wasn't relieved. She couldn't understand why I wasn't thanking her for her foresight. The pain I felt in that moment was different from the initial shock of discovery. It was a deeper, more existential ache. It wasn't just that she had slept with another man. It was that she viewed me as a utility. I was the reliable appliance, the sturdy foundation, the safety net. I was there to provide the structure, but I was not the focus. I was the background scenery in the movie of her life. She had reduced our marriage to a transactional agreement where I provided stability and she provided what? Exactly. The presence of a wife? The appearance of a happy couple? I realized then that she didn't respect me. She didn't see me as an equal partner with feelings and a right to trust. She saw me as an object to be managed, a resource to be exploited. She reached out to touch my hand, her fingers cool and soft, try to offer comfort. She told me that she loved me, that she didn't want a divorce, that she wanted us to stay together. She promised she would be more careful, that she would hide it better if it upset me so much. That was the final straw. The offer to lie more effectively, the concession that she would do me the favor of hiding her betrayal better in the future, was the most insulting thing she could have said. It stripped away the last veneer of love and replaced it with cold, hard calculation. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for permission to continue using me. She was negotiating the terms of my own humiliation, and she honestly believed she was being generous. The silence that stretched between us after she finished speaking was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. I looked at her, the woman I had pledged my life to, the woman I thought I knew, and I saw a stranger. It wasn't just a matter of infidelity. People cheat, and it is awful, but there is usually a messy, human element to it. There is guilt, there is confusion, there's a recognition that a terrible mistake has been made. But this was different. This was a cold, calculated dismantling of my reality. She had sat in our home, eaten meals I cooked, slept in our bed, and looked me in the eye every single day with the specific intent to deceive, all while believing she was doing nothing wrong. That level of detachment was sociopathic. It scared me in a way that heartbreak never could. It made me question every memory we shared. If she could lie about this so easily and for so long, was anything ever real? I stood up, unable to sit in the same space as her any longer. I walked to the window and looked out at the street, watching the neighbors go about their Saturday morning routines. A man was washing his car. A woman was walking a dog. They looked like normal people living normal lives. I wonder how many of them were living the same lie I was. I wondered how many of them were coming home to partners who viewed them as obstacles to be managed rather than humans to be loved. The world felt suddenly gray and untrustworthy. The foundation of my reality, the belief that love and trust were the bedrock of a marriage, had been replaced by a utilitarian nightmare where loyalty was optional and deception was a strategy. She mistook my movement for hesitation, perhaps even a sign that I was considering her offer. She started talking again, ramping up the sales pitch for her twisted vision of our future. She started listing the benefits again. She talked about how much fun we could have if we just let go of our jealousy. She described how we could be a power couple, unburdened by the constraints of traditional morality. She used buzzwords she probably read in some magazine or on a blog, words meant to sanitize the rot at the core of her argument. She was trying to sell me on the idea that my dignity was a small price to pay for her happiness. She was asking me to eat the garbage she was serving and thank her for the meal. Turning back to face her, I felt a strange sense of clarity cut through the fog of my pain. I saw the desperation now. It wasn't about love for me. It was about fear of losing her comfortable setup. She didn't want to lose the house, the status, or the ease of our life. She didn't want to face the social stigma of a divorce. She wanted to keep her cake and eat it too, and she needed my cooperation to do it. Without me, she was just a woman who cheated. With me staying, she was a pioneer of a modern lifestyle. She needed my consent to validate her choices. She needed me to agree that I was nothing more than a roommate with a paycheck so she could feel good about herself. And that was the one thing I could not give her. I realized then that the woman I loved was dead. She had died the moment she decided that her desires were more important than my humanity. The person sitting in front of me was a simulacrum, a shell that looked like my wife but operated on a completely different operating system. There was no way to reason with her because her logic was fundamentally broken. There was no way to appeal to her empathy because she had none for me. There was no way to fix this because she didn't think it was broken. The justification she had offered, that she was doing this for us, for our stability, was the ultimate insult. It stripped me of my agency and reduced our marriage to a business arrangement where one partner had unilaterally decided to rewrite the contract without informing the other. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing. No love, no hate, just a vast, empty indifference. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a landscape of ash. I saw the prettiness of her face, the stylishness of her clothes, the intelligence in her eyes, and I saw nothing but a hollow vessel. She was a con artist who had started to believe her own con. She was a person who had rearranged her moral universe to center entirely on herself, and I was just a satellite in her orbit, useful only as long as I remained in the position she assigned for me. The worst part wasn't the sex with Julian. It was the years of lying, the systematic devaluation of my worth, and the arrogant belief that she could explain it all away with a PowerPoint presentation on modern relationships. I realized that I didn't just need to leave her. I needed to excise her from my life like a tumor. I didn't argue with her. I didn't raise my voice or engage in a debate about the merits of ethical non-monogamy versus traditional marriage. There was no point. You cannot debate reality with someone who lives in a world of their own fabrication. Anything I said would be twisted, analyzed, and used to further her narrative. I simply walked past her, ignoring her confused questions about where I was going. I went to the study, grabbed a suitcase from the closet, and began throwing clothes into it. I didn't fold them. I didn't plan outfits. I just grabbed handfuls of my life and shoved them into the bag, needing only to escape, to put physical distance between myself and the toxin that had infected my home. She followed me, hovering in the doorway, her composure finally cracking. For the first time, she sounded panicked. She asked me what I was doing, told me I was overreacting, said that we weren't finished talking. She seemed genuinely shocked that I wasn't accepting her proposal. She couldn't comprehend that her logic wasn't a solution, but a confession of her inability to love. She tried to grab my arm, to physically stop me from packing, but I pulled away as if her touch burned. I couldn't bear to be touched by her. I couldn't bear to look at her. I just needed to get out. I needed to breathe air that didn't smell like her perfume and her lies. I zipped the bag shut and shouldered it, the weight feeling light compared to the burden I had been carrying for the past 8 months. I walked to the front door, her voice rising behind me, shifting from confusion to anger. She started accusing me of being closed-minded, of being a coward, of throwing away a perfectly good life because I couldn't handle her growth. It was amazing how quickly the mask of the rational, pragmatic partner fell away, revealing the spoiled child underneath. When manipulation failed, she turned to cruelty, lashing out in a desperate attempt to maintain control. But her words just bounced off me. I was immune. I had seen the truth, and no amount of shouting could cover it up. I paused at the threshold of the house, the home we had made together, looking at the familiar living room one last time. It looked the same as it had yesterday, but it was completely different. It was just a structure now, a shell of wood and brick, devoid of the love that used to fill it. I looked at her, standing in the middle of the room, angry and disheveled, and I felt a profound sense of pity. She had everything a person could want: love, security, partnership, and she destroyed it because she thought she deserved more. She would wake up tomorrow alone in that big, empty house, and she would still be the same person, still empty, still chasing a fulfillment that would never come because she didn't know how to be happy. I didn't say goodbye. There were no words that could capture the finality of the moment. I just turned, opened the door, and walked out into the sunlight. I got into my car and drove away, watching the house disappear in the rearview mirror until it was just a speck in the distance. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was free. The pain would come later, I knew. The grief would hit me in waves in the days and weeks to follow. I would have to navigate the messy legalities of divorce, the awkward explanations to friends, and the long, slow process of rebuilding a life from scratch. But as I drove, I felt a lightness I hadn't felt in years. The affair had been devastating, yes. But the justification? The cold, calculated reasoning that I was a means to an end? That was what killed the marriage. It was the realization that I was alone in the relationship, that my partner had checked out long ago and left me holding the bag. I realized that the worst part of being cheated on wasn't the physical act. It was the discovery that the person you loved thought you were stupid enough to accept it. I drove toward the horizon, leaving the betrayal behind, stepping out of the shadow of her lie and into the harsh, liberating light of the truth. I was starting over, but this time, I would be the one writing the story. And this time, there would be no lies,